Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We've had a huge amount of people participating here tonight, so thank you for your patience in waiting. You're all very welcome to our webinar here this evening, Online Harm, Protecting Children and Young People. Tonight's webinar aims to support parents understand more about emerging online harms in today's world. ISPCC is a partner in the Irish Safer Internet Centre, whose vision is a positive and inclusive digital world where children and young people are safe and protected. And this evening's webinar here this evening is co-funded by the European Union. Tonight, we aim to support you to support your young person to be safe online. My name is Siobhan Harvey, and I am the Community Engagement Manager with the ISPCC. Also joining me on the webinar this evening are my colleagues Niamh Clark, also Community Engagement Manager, and Aoife Griffin, Service Manager. Aoife is going to begin our main talk for this evening in a few minutes. Aoife is going to focus on the current and growing harm to children and young people, trends and issues for children and young people online, and how to support your child if something goes wrong. So looking at emotional support and signposting to relevant services. We really hope as parents and carers that you come away feeling more knowledgeable on the topic of online harm and also feel more empowered as a result. Before I hand over to Aoife, I'd like to go over some housekeeping points as well as talking a little bit about the suite of ISPCC Childline services and programmes that we offer. So firstly, you'll notice that all participants have been automatically placed on mute and your cameras off, and it will remain this way for the duration of the webinar. We will have a Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions during the webinar, you can send them in using the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. The chat function is not working, so we won't be using that, so if it's through the Q&A. If we don't get to answer your question, please feel free to contact us afterwards for anything you want to. All our contact details will be shown at the end of the webinar as well. And just a reminder to remind everyone that this evening's webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on ISPCC digital platform in the coming weeks. So ISPCC offer many universal services and programmes that can be accessed anywhere in the Republic of Ireland. We're probably most known for our Childline listening service, which is a 24/7 service available to all children and young people up to and including the age of 18 via phone and online chat. On top of this, we also have our Ask the Team service for children and young people, where they can ask a question about anything that they want. They just pop it in and we reply back. Our Ask Robin service is similar to the Ask the Team, and this is for adults where they can ask us a question on anything to do with parenting, and we will answer back and support around parenting questions. We have our Smart Moves programme, which is a school's transition programme, aims to support the emotional resilience of children as they prepare to transition from primary school to secondary school. Another one of our programmes is the SHIELD programme, and this is ISPCC's proactive approach to tackling bullying. It's designed to support schools, clubs, youth centres and any organisations seeking to prevent bullying before it starts. We also have a huge amount of webinars, just like this evening, which are online presentations to support and educate parents, where we allow participants to ask questions. So previous webinars that we've done include a lot of other webinars on online safety, anxiety, building resilience, exam anxiety, school avoidance, keeping connected in the tween years. Our other parenting supports are the Parenting Hub and Digital Ready Hub, which is a modern, engaging and impactful platform. It's the go-to destination for parenting and digital supports, where it provides clear, expert-backed and up-to-date information, and it's designed to meet the evolving needs of parents. We also have a support line, which is a listening service offering information, advice and emotional support to parents and carers. And this opens Monday to Friday between the hours of 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. by calling 01 522 4300. In addition to these universal services, we have more targeted supports for children and young people and parents who need additional supports. And we can direct from our universal services into these more targeted supports. So our first one is our Childline Therapeutic Support Service. And this provides children, young people and families with therapeutic support. We can meet children and young people wherever they feel most comfortable. It's one-to-one. It can be online, it can be in their home, or it might be in a local community centre. It's wherever they feel most comfortable. We have this service in various locations throughout the country. We have our non-violent resist. This is a supportive program provided by our Childline therapeutic support workers for parents that are experiencing child-to-parent violence. We also have our digital mental health and wellbeing programs, which are aimed at reducing anxiety for children and young people, and digital programs for parents and carers around managing their own anxiety while supporting their anxious child or teen. And finally, we're delighted to say that Vodafone Ireland Foundation has partnered with DCU Anti-Bullying Centre and Childline by ISPCC to develop and launch the Tozy app. Now, this app is aimed at creating a safer, more positive online space for young people. So this app is for young people. It aims to educate, empower, and support them with the tools and advice they need to have a more positive online experience delivered through this app and engaging features. So that was a quick whistle-top tour of all of ISPCC supports and programs. If you do want any more information for any of them, you can log on to ispcc.ie where you can find more information on all of the supports that I just spoke about. I'd now like to introduce you to Aoife. Aoife joined the ISPCC For Me service, as it was known, back in 2002, which has since developed into what is now called our Childline Therapeutic Support Service. After several years working with families, Aoife became Services Manager for the South and West. During her time as manager with the ISPCC, Aoife has been involved in a variety of projects such as the SHIELD programme, National Schools Consultation, and the Pilot Advocacy and Volunteer Project, as well as our eSupport pilot. Aoife has also acted as Head of Advocacy and Interim Head of Frontline Services. Alongside her current role as Services Manager for the South and West, Aoife is the ISPCC's Safeguarding Lead.
Sorry, there had to be something. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thanks, Siobhan and Niamh. So tonight we're looking at, I suppose, really about the emerging trends and issues that are coming up for young people online at the moment. As Siobhan mentioned, we would have done previous webinars on digital abuse and other issues relating to online harm and safety. And we were then looking at, well, what is happening in the space at the moment. And for that, we really look to our Childline data, what the young people are telling us, about what's going on for them, and in our frontline services as well. So I'm going to take you through some of those issues coming up tonight. Childline is our, as I said, our 24-hour listening service, 365 days a year, and really it is really at the pulse, I suppose, of what's happening for children and young people. So it's really that information and what children and young people are telling us on a daily basis that really leads what we do in terms of educating parents, working with other stakeholders, etc. Also, our referrals to our therapeutic service. So on our therapeutic service, we work with a lot of children who are experiencing anxiety or some other challenges in their lives. And when we talk to them, we find out, well, what's happening in terms of online safety and what their online life is like. And then in our outreaches and group work as well, that's when young people will tell us, you know, maybe kind of what's the kind of issue of the day, I suppose. And it was really during one of these calls to Childline in particular that got us thinking about the world, I suppose, of financial sexual extortion, where we had a young person who was just scrolling through TikTok, I think it was on a Sunday, was looking at the comment section of a chat or a TikTok video about skincare, clicked on a comment and was taken into the Discord website and saw some child abuse material and was really quite distressed on seeing this, and would have called Childline for support on that day. And it was then through that chat and looking at other experiences by volunteers online that we really thought, well, this is a growing issue for young people in Ireland today, and let's delve a little bit deeper into this. So really, I suppose, you know, we do take what children tell us very seriously, and we do try and then, you know, I suppose develop resources and, you know, programs, webinars, things like this around those issues so we can share our experience. And particularly in the online world, you know, online safety is one of our main pillars of advocacy. And we really try and, I suppose, look at what young people are telling us and be that voice for young people. So some of the topics that we'll cover tonight, it would be the increased use of AI by children and young people, the risks associated with AI, that's artificial intelligence, and in particular focusing on child sexual abuse material. We'll cover and chat a little bit about chatbots. We'll talk about financially motivated sexual extortion and some slides as well around neuromarketing. And I suppose this isn't an exhaustive list. We could probably run a webinar on each of these topics, but for tonight, we're going to give a general overview of what we're seeing coming up in our services, as I said. So some of it might be quite heavy at the start. So I would just, encourage everyone to kind of keep themselves safe, and that some of this material may not, be maybe difficult to hear, I suppose. So just to mind yourselves within that as well. So we hear a lot about AI, and I suppose when I was doing the research and looking at what kind of content I'd put together, really I was thinking about, well, what does AI mean to me and to, people in my life? And I suppose when I was delving down to it, I kind of realized that AI is just a part of our lives now, and we use AI all day, every day, even down to something like our predictive text in WhatsApp is actually AI. And look, you look at things like Netflix, I've up there, Google Maps, facial recognition, customer service chatbots. When you go onto Ryanair online and you want to sort out something to do with your passport, it's AI that all of these services are using, and it can range from really simple systems like recommendation algorithms to more advanced applications like self-driving cars in the future. Your smart home, I'm sure, devices, some of you may have a robot Hoover. All of those kind of things use AI, but it's quite, I suppose, a simple form of AI. And really, when we're talking about AI in the context of this evening's webinar, we're talking about generative AI. And this is a type of AI that can create new content and ideas. And it's seen a huge uptake in recent years. One of the statistics from CyberSafe Kids says that over a quarter of primary school age children are using AI in their everyday lives. And these are children aged 8 to 12. So they're looking at, using generative AI for their homework to create art. And I see my little girls would, have an art app and, can make up hairstyles and, do makeup and dress up all through games on the phone. And social media platforms, of course, are using generative AI as well. So ChatGPT, people might be very familiar with, has been one of the fastest growing digital services of all time, seen an unprecedented level of growth in the last couple of years, really. So just to put it in context then with maybe what's happening with kids, CyberSafe Kids, as I mentioned already, did a recent survey. Over a third of children aged 12 to 15 were using AI chatbots to act as a friend, to help them with their homework, to access information. It's their go-to. It's no longer the Britannia Encyclopedia on the shelf that they're going to, for information. It is AI. And furthermore, over a quarter of primary school children are using AI in the same way. And they've, as mentioned already, very little safeguards in relation to using it. So what, I suppose, would be the harms or the risks associated with AI? Advertising, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on, but advertising and targeting of children with ads would be maybe a risk associated with AI. Deep fakes, people might be familiar with the term, and that is where, AI can generate a picture, loosely based on maybe some information or a real picture that can be distorted to make a completely fake picture or a video image. You might have seen deep fakes in relation to politicians and things they might be saying, and they are becoming increasingly pervasive across the internet. AI generated sexual abuse material, which is, of course, a huge concern for us and for many organizations, and financially motivated sexual extortion, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly. And the use of chatbots for advice and therapy. And I was actually approached recently about an article to talk about the use of chatbots for advice and therapy. And it's something that we're seeing young people and children talk about on Childline also. So in terms of financially motivated sexual extortion, which I'll be spending a good bit of time talking about tonight, we're going to cover kind of three main areas around that. self-generated images, AI generated images, and the role of organised crime in this as well. So what is self-generated child sexual abuse material? We call it CSAM, or it's widely known as CSAM for short. So according to Irish Internet Hotline, which is the organisation where all of these reports will go each year, either from the public or from the platforms, or from, I suppose, agencies across the world that come across images, they will alert Hotline. And there was a 166% increase in reports of self-generated child sexual abuse material in 2024 compared to the previous year. So that was a massive, massive increase. And it really showed, okay, this is a real emerging issue, and not just emerging, it is here. So these are images or videos that children have taken themselves. So they may have access to a smartphone or a webcam. There's no one else in the room. They're taking these images and sending them possibly to someone under pressure, or they're being manipulated. Sometimes they can be taken in innocence and maybe sent in a Snapchat. I suppose it really is about that there's no one else in the room directing them. There may of course be someone online, but there isn't maybe that traditional image of what maybe making a child abuse image would be. And they don't wouldn't understand the consequences of sharing such content, and what the implication of that might be. So some key statistics from the report would say that there was 11,505 reports of CSAM generated in 2024, and that was up hugely from the previous year. 92% of victims were girls, and 56% of these were aged 4 to 12, and 43% were aged 13 to 16. So you're seeing there quite young children involved in self-generated child sexual abuse material. The forums, so forums like Discord, as I mentioned already, were the primary distribution channel, and that makes removal really difficult for the likes of Hotline or the Gardaí. They're, I suppose, operating maybe on a different level than your normal, I suppose, social media channels, that try and, I suppose, come across maybe as being proactive in this area. There are people, I suppose, using these forums and very cleverly and very good at making them difficult to be traced. And 161 cases were referred to the Gardaí at the request of the reporter. So they went on maybe from the reports on to being referred to the Gardaí. So the Gardaí, they're dealing with this each week, and they're seeing a huge increase in the number of reports coming into them as well. So then I suppose moving on from the self-generated is the AI generated. And I suppose this is something that people talk to us quite a bit about, that once in, sharing of images of children, and maybe the lack of safeguards surrounding that, the kind of idea that parents are sharing images of their own children, and that being, maybe a cause for concern, and just children sending images of themselves as well. But the AI generated CSAM refers to the use of AI algorithms to create lifelike but fake. So this is where the deep fake comes in, explicit content involving minors. And this type of material is used then to threaten or coerce children or young people into complying with their demands, whether it be sending money or sending an image or doing a sex act to prevent the release of the images. So very quickly, I suppose, they can target young people in this way and look for money for the most part. And also, I suppose the main kind of concern around it is that also there no longer needs to be a real nude sent or an explicit photo. Now they can create fake versions. So this is where that sharing thing issue might come in. It can be where people innocently put up photos of themselves on public platforms, where maybe they don't have their privacy settings on, or, maybe they're sharing to lots of people they don't know, they're on public, and they're just putting them out there. These photos can be taken now and deep fakes created as a result. So again, it's something that we'd be quite concerned about. The technology is quite advanced and it allows the user to create new images, videos, audio, text. So they're like the deep fakes I mentioned earlier. Now you can, someone can say one thing and then a deep fake can use an algorithm and, they can, create chaos, I suppose, in what they're saying, and they could be quite a respected person. And the deep fakes are so sophisticated, it's really hard for people to be able to tell what's real and what is fake. They can really look shockingly real, I suppose. And, I think one of the main issues for young people when this happens is, the reputational damage that's done. Once an image is out there, it's very hard to get it removed. And it's very hard, I suppose, to be able to defend yourself, when you may not have a public platform, or these things can, I suppose, spread like wildfire. So it's a really concerning, and it's causing a lot of stress and anxiety for young people, and it's probably one of the the top risks that really is out there at the moment. Where financially motivated sexual extortion comes in is when these images, whether they be self-generated or they're AI created, whether they're deep fakes, is when there's blackmail involved. So this is a type of blackmail where the perpetrator uses threats and intimidation to extort money from their victim by threatening to distribute the pictures or intimate content or to publish them somewhere. In this case, for the most part, it's purely about money, and it has nothing to do with sexual gratification. The motivation is power, money, and this is really key, I suppose, when it comes to dealing with it. It is really about getting to the young person or the adult. It can also happen to adults, but it's really about getting money, and it's a really quick, I suppose, kind of, it happens very quickly over a really short period of time. In the past year, In Hope, which is has witnessed a rapid increase in financial extortion reports. So what happens when there is financial motivated sexual extortion? You'll see some common perpetrator approaches to it. Someone will be online and they will friend the young person and establish trust really quickly. So this can be through a number of different ways. It can be through a platform like, say, Instagram and just friending. Maybe it could be through an online game, and it could be through forums where, a young person is going on and they're talking about maybe comics that are interested in, and the person behind the extortion will know a lot of detail about the game, say, for example, and I suppose establish a trust and come across like they're really into that particular game. They know a lot about it. They know how to maybe get onto different levels, so they'll have a way, I suppose, of establishing trust with the young person and maybe give them a little bit, whether I say, like, for example, as I said, it might be information, or, it can be a picture maybe themselves. It can be promising gifts and favors in exchange for something. And then what will happen is that a young person will send the picture, and then they'll very quickly get a threat or blackmail, looking for money, looking for something, and all within a matter of minutes, generally. So regardless of how or whether the perpetrator obtains the material, the fear of it being shared causes extreme feelings of shame, anxiety, and helplessness. And I suppose this is where then young people may not feel empowered or may not feel confident in talking to their parent or talking to a trusted adult because of that shame and the anxiety around it and the threat that, that they will be, this picture or whatever will be exposed and everyone they know will see it. I just wanted to kind of discuss, I suppose, the real life tragedy around this type of extortion, and talk really briefly about two boys. The first, Jordan DeMay, who was 17 years old. He was on Instagram one evening. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and he was befriended by a girl online. very pretty looking girl, spoke about, people they would have had in common. He could see that they had friends in common. So, it didn't feel like a big deal to add her as a friend. She would have sent him a picture of herself, and he sent a picture after it was requested. And within minutes, there was demands looking for $3,000, or the photo would be shared. Now, I suppose at the time, Jordan would have sent some money, whatever money he had access to, and this chat went on all night long. And by the next morning, he had unfortunately taken his own life. So it kind of illustrates in a very stark way how quickly this kind of crime can be perpetrated. Again, another young man, Gavin Guffey, who was also 17, had taken his own life within hours of receiving threats online, and demands for money were actually sent to his family. And I suppose the key thing here was how quickly it happened, and that feeling of helplessness and not feeling maybe they could talk to somebody and tell them what was going on. And I suppose the key to this also was these young guys wouldn't have been classed as being vulnerable. They had everything going for them. And by that, they had everything to lose, I suppose, in their own view. Jordan was, on the school football team. They had lots of friends, great family. They wouldn't have been particularly kids that would have stood out for any reason other than that they were young and were online, basically. And what I suppose came out of all of this was a very deep investigation then into who was behind this blackmail. And some investigation was done, and they found that it was actually organized crime gangs in Africa that it could be traced back to. And they discovered that the amount of reports that were being making right across the US in this context was enormous in compared to the couple of previous years. So you see there, 2021, there was 139 cases reported. It was 36,000 by 2024. So it shows the huge, sharp increase in reports of this type of extortion happening. The three platforms where it was most happening was Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. And Snapchat themselves conducted research in 2024, and they found that 51% of teens had been targeted through their platform. 23% were victimized. So they could see it happening on their own platform and how young people had become victims. I suppose just to mention some of the platforms, there would have privacy settings in place, they would have age verification in place, but we know that young people are still going through them. We know that, in particular, these gangs, these organized crime gangs are targeting Snapchat and TikTok, because that's where young people are at, and the fact that the messages disappear on Snapchat, but TikTok as well, because there isn't any social media, I suppose, or relationship as part of TikTok, and I'll talk a little bit about that and what I mean by that in a couple of minutes. Young people are on there and they're very much just seeing a feed, and that the algorithm is feeding into that feed. So these organized crime gangs can really hide within TikTok. I suppose some people would be, maybe kind of, feeling alarm. They're young people. Your young people might be on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, and kind of going, well, is my child going to potentially fall victim to this? This is why we're doing the webinar, I suppose, is to bring these kind of issues to your attention. Education is key here. I started chatting to my 13-year-old about this particular issue, in the run up to this webinar, and was he aware of any of the issues? And, I do think it wasn't something that he'd come across, but, I suppose it was good to have the chat and kind of say, well, look, these are why we have things like the Family Link app, and this is why I'm talking to you about it, because this does happen to young people, and, early intervention is key here. One of the main pieces of advice that has come from the authorities is that if it does happen to you, never pay. These gangs, they are targeting they will move on. If you don't pay, they generally move on. They really want the money. It's not about the extortion, or it's not about the picture. It's not about the image. It's not about you. It's about getting the money. So if they don't get a response, they will move on, unfortunately, potentially to another victim. But the key message, that I have seen right across all of the authorities and agencies is never to pay. And to report it, of course, report it to the guards, report it to hotline. I share those details at the end. And to, of course, tell an adult, tell someone you trust what is happening or what has happened. So I suppose that's quite heavy content. I'm moving on to talking a little bit about neuromarketing now. And again, as I said, look, make sure you're feeling okay after, taking all of that in. And I do tend to talk quite quickly, so hopefully you can watch it back after when you get the recording, and maybe have a think about, or chat to your child, or have a chat to other parents. Is this something that's an issue for them? And there's lots of support available, and I'll obviously take any questions at the end as well if anyone wants some further information. But at this point, I will talk a little bit about neuromarketing. I suppose this is another way in which young people can feel financially targeted and vulnerable and exposed, maybe, and it's probably something a lot more subtle, and I suppose in a way that we might all be victim to, because neuromarketing techniques have been around as long as ads have been around, and companies are extremely good at using techniques to place their product correctly, to get as many people buying their product as possible. So through neuroimaging techniques, scientists have the ability to link up basic decision-making processes, your memories, attention, withdrawal, motivation, or your feelings, in relation to their brands and brand loyalty. So I picked Coca-Cola as an example because everybody would be familiar with it. And I suppose thinking about the Coca-Cola ads that you might have seen over the years, whether it be the red color, that's, it's like the Coca-Cola red, and we all know it as the Coca-Cola red. Whether it be, the Christmas ad, you kind of feel it's the start of Christmas when you hear the jingle coming along, coming onto the TV, or whether that's, they use a lot of ads where they use sound. So that's sensory feeling, you open the can and you hear the can open and it quenches your thirst, and you start to maybe thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind a Coke myself. They are all neuroimaging techniques that they have used, the marketing companies are using, sharing a drink with friends, all of that, to get you to buy their product. McDonald's is another good example as well. Those colors of red and yellow are associated with appetite stimulation and emotional warmth. So you think of, McDonald's, you get a good feeling, sharing a meal with family or friends, going to something and stopping for McDonald's on the way home. So as I said, these are all techniques that companies have been using for a long time. But I suppose it's in the advance of social media is where you really see, and AI, where you see neuromarketing going to a new level. So TikTok has been around since 2017, but it was really in 2020 during the pandemic that TikTok pounced, I suppose, on users who, Instagram and Facebook maybe wasn't appealing to, like I still use Facebook, but certainly my kids wouldn't use Facebook. TikTok is where they're all at. And really the key is their algorithm. Their goal is that the user stays on the app as long as possible. And I know we've all probably been doom scrolling in the evening, staying on TikTok and, going on TikTok for a few minutes, and next thing an hour has gone. So really they're trying to get you to stay on the app as long as possible. And it's about personalized pleasure. So TikTok is, it's presenting us with a new person who does something funny, or is cooking something or showing skincare, whatever it is, and it's personalized for us. So the algorithm knows what Aoife likes, what Aoife watches regularly, and that's the content they're feeding me. And I'm not looking at anybody else. I'm not looking at what, the 60th celebrations at the weekend. I'm not looking at those photos like it might be on Facebook, or someone's lovely sunset on Instagram. Someone I know. This is about me and about my pleasure as such. So we don't really have any connection with those content creators. It's about the speed of the content delivery. And I suppose a lot of the concern then has been about, data privacy, the algorithms, what young people are watching, their immediate gratification, and a rise in loneliness amongst young people. All of these things can be linked. And in terms of advertising, they're using all those newer marketing techniques such as eye tracking, AI-powered predictive modeling, and in-app purchasing as well. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, and particularly in relation to TikTok, was that young person who rang Childline quite distressed because of going into watching a skincare video and then looking at the comments, and then very quickly getting in and seeing some really disturbing images. And that was about the in-app purchasing and the ads and that are associated with TikTok. And also I was thinking as well about Charlie Kirk, and I would never have heard of him until he was assassinated. And I was talking to my son about it, and he'd heard of him, and he said, oh yeah, I have seen some videos of his as well. And we were chatting about what that meant and what he stood for, but it really struck home for me that I don't really know what he's watching. I go into his TikTok and I look, and there's a lot of rugby videos and stuff like that, but because it moves so quickly and it's very like personalized, and it could be a couple of words that are taken, and then the next video is based on those, that really quickly you could see something that you may not be comfortable with your child or young person seeing or being exposed to. Some of the effects of neuromarketing on children and young people, aside from that, would be the promotion of materialistic values in children and the strain on the parent-child relationship. And I suppose that has always been around. That idea of, as someone phrased it the other day, as pester power. They see something, they see people their own age having certain, whether it be skincare or clothes or shoes. And I often think of something like Prime and how we scoured shops for Prime when on holidays one year, and Prime was over in a couple of months. Those kind of things where they're seeing them on social media and they need to have it, they want to have it. The idea kind of linked to that would be the idea of life dissatisfaction and comparisons with people who may be better off than them, exploiting insecurities. They will take a child's desire to fit in by creating scenarios and products that make them feel like they need to have something to be happy or popular. The long-term impact as well of constantly looking at this curated content and, being looking at these kind of constant ads all of the time, and developmental concerns. And I want to chat a little bit more about that. I suppose from ages 3 to 7, you've children looking at ads and they're in the perceptual stage. So they'll very much believe what the ad is saying. They'll know the jingles. They can probably sing the ad song, and they will take it very literally. So it's important, I suppose, to talk to them about, well, what is an ad, and kind of change their perceptions around that. Ages 7 to 11, then they're in a more of an analytical stage. They can distinguish what's an ad and understand that ads can be biased. They have a little bit more understanding. And then as they get older, they'll move into a reflective stage where they'll know, that ads are there to sell them something. They can reflect and understand what ads mean and why they're targeted at them. The challenges to this is, alongside the developmental concerns of something like neuromarketing, is that it's so fast paced, the nature of the media environment. We really can't keep up, or it feels like we can't keep up at times. So it's always changing. There's always something new. Influencers, and I suppose their role as relatable role models. You know, I think back to when my kids were young about Ryan's toys and how we started watching him when he was really just unboxing, probably the trip to the toy store on a Saturday, to, you know, his parents being involved and living in a huge house and getting sent toys every day and games to play with. And Ryan's toys became a big thing in our house. What was Ryan doing today? So that relationship, and that special relationship almost that they have with influencers. Um, there are a lot more protections and policies in place, thankfully, now in terms of influencers, but still there can be, you know, there can be issues with that as well. Shoppable ads I've mentioned, and gaming and in-app purchases, and you know, you'd hear some horror stories of kids buying, you know, some of the in-app purchases, getting access to a credit card, and you know, buying cryptocurrencies and things like that. But they're all ads aimed at children all of the time. So just to be, I suppose, mindful of those as well. So as a parent, what can you do? And there's lots of strategies, I suppose. And I suppose as a parent, you have to decide what is the strategy for you. We would talk about restrictive mediation, and really, I suppose we understand that restrictive mediation doesn't really work. Taking a phone or device or something off a child, or you know, not allowing them to see things, probably doesn't work in the long term. Maybe it might make it more attractive, and they'll get to it some other kind of ways. So mediating what they watch or the content by being too restrictive isn't always possibly the best approach. You could take a co-viewing approach, and this really is about, you know, sitting down with your young person, watching the same things, watching the same content or program, or looking at TikTok together, and sharing that experience and making it valuable for them and chatting about it. We're all obsessed with traitors in our house at the moment, and you know, it's a fight to get them to bed in the evening, but it's actually lovely to sit down and kind of chat through what's happening. So taking a co-viewing approach is something that you might consider. Possibly the optimum one would be the active mediation. And this would be parents involving themselves, looking at the media, discussing it, and really trying to foster critical thinking and digital literacy. And what I mean by that is really interrogating the information before him or her, and saying, well, look, what do you think of this? Do you think this is real? Do you think this is fake? What do you think was going on here? Learning about the apps yourself, exploring them together. They want to get something, and it's about, well, go, I don't really know much about it. I'm going to ask my friend Mary's mom about it first and see their views, or let's download it together and have a look, or what, you know, what are the, you know, the good websites, the trusted sources telling me about this game or this app. So really being responsible about it, but taking, I suppose, an approach where you're saying to your child or young person, look, I'm not sure. I'm not saying you can get this. I'm not saying you can't. Let's do a little bit more research on this. So that's what we mean when we say active mediation. And coming on this webinar, that's all part of it as well. So looking at the device, supervising their use, looking at your family link, if that's the app you want to use, there are others, privacy controls, engaging in their media world, watching, asking questions, and teaching critical thinking as well. Who's that influencer? What do they do? Do you think this is all their life? What's behind it? Just having those conversations. How to support your child, I suppose, again, open conversations, initiating honest and open conversations. I find that can work really well, you know, when you're driving after training or picking them up after school, and just having a gentle chat, and, you know, rather than waiting until something happens, or, you know, kind of constantly keeping it on the agenda. Education around responsible digital citizenship. You know, the advice for years has always been to, you know, stop and think what you post online. Don't put anything out there you wouldn't want your granny to see. Talking about the things we've been talking about for the last number of years when it comes to online safety. Promoting online skepticism, I think, is a really important piece, just for them to be aware not everything they see online is real, and maybe to interrogate it a little bit. Setting clear boundaries, encourage them to think twice before posting or sharing anything, using the privacy settings, familiarizing yourself with them and talking to your children about them as well. Monitor their online activities using apps. Every so often I'll say, I want to see your TikTok feed, I want to see your Snapchat feed. It's our phone, we're still paying for it. You can do that. Reporting, of course, anything you see suspicious. We're all trying to navigate the complexities of the digital world, so it's important that we educate ourselves as well as our children. And establishing a sense of trust so they feel comfortable coming to you with a concern. That goes back to engaging in open conversations and, you know, constantly telling them if they see anything that's upsetting, to tell you, or a friend, or, if a friend has experienced anything, that they can come to you. There'll be no judgment. You'll sort it in the moment, but that they can come to you with anything. Where are good places of support? Hotline.ie is the Irish National Reporting Centre, where members of the public can securely, anonymously report concerns, especially any material that they come across, and the removal of that material is part of the role of Irish the hotline.ie. So you see there all of those activities, anything like that can be reported to hotline.ie. Financial scams, just to really mention that really quickly. I was listening to the radio and they were talking about money muling, something that we might cover in a further webinar, and just for young people going to college in particular to be aware of money muling scams that might be happening, asking you to mine money in a Revolut account, or which might seem quite innocent, but just not to get involved in if anything seems suspicious. It generally is. WebWise is a great resource. It's the online safety initiative of the Department of Education, co-funded by the European Commission. They run Safer Internet Day, and there's lots of resources for parents and teachers and youth on there. We have our own ISPCC Digital Ready Hub on our website, and this is really useful if you're thinking about giving your young person a smartphone, going on there and seeing if you're both digital ready. I think is key there, instead of handing over a device, making sure you know enough as well as the parent or the carer. So this could be our first stop when you're thinking about getting to that time of maybe you're going to have to get a smartphone or some kind of device for your young person. Our own support line is open. Siobhan would have mentioned that at the start, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll take calls from anyone in the public. We take calls from parents, carers, grandparents, stakeholders, referrers, anyone who's, might be concerned about an online safety issue. Our Ask Robin service, you can go on there and you might see questions already relating to any topic that, you might be concerned about, and you can also send in a question as well. A parenting hub as well, as there's great number of articles on all of these issues and more, and the Digital Ready Hub. And Siobhan also mentioned the TOSI app, which is aimed at creating a safer, more positive online space for young people. Look, we're realistic. We're doing this webinar tonight online. We know young people are on, online. That is their world now, more so than at any other time. They're growing up with being part of the digital world. So, we need to just make sure that it is as safe as possible for them. So that's it. Sorry, I flew through that. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Aoife. That was a fantastic session. Thank you very much. So, as a parent myself, you really do need those reminders about the reality of what can happen online and how quickly it can happen as well. So I think sometimes we do need those reminders. So thanks again for that. And also to know, and it is reassuring that even though you can become overwhelmed with this topic, that, the key things are around educating yourself as a parent, connecting with your child or your young person as well, and teaching them to think critically, which I think is a real key skill when we're going online for all of us, actually. So thanks for sharing all of that. Just before we go to questions, Aoife, I'm just going to run a quick poll for everybody there at home. So I'm just going to pop that up now. So if you don't mind answering these questions as they come up, as we move on to the Q&A as well, that would be great. So I again just remind you of the support services that we do have. So that's our support line is open Monday to Friday, 9 to 1, as Aoife was saying. So it's 01522 4300. So if you do feel you want to ask us any questions about anything you've heard tonight, please do reach out to us. And we will have email addresses up at the end as well if you want to reach out to myself or Siobhan, and we can pass on any queries to Aoife as well. Aoife, are you ready to take a couple of questions?
Sure.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we've one in here this evening now. It says, what signs should I look out for if I think my child might be a victim of extortion?
Great question. I suppose it's not dissimilar to any other change you see in your child. I suppose the first thing would be becoming withdrawn. So maybe pulling back either, physically or emotionally from you or the family. So, maybe staying in their room, not engaging with the family, not coming downstairs, not joining meals. There might be a change in terms of, becoming more secretive, not telling you what they're up to or where they're going. There may be, they might have more money than they had previously. They might be asking for money on the flip side. They might have been saving up for something and they've used that money for something else. So really kind of a sudden change in behavior is generally the main one, but becoming withdrawn and kind of pulling back, I suppose, from everybody else and activities and friendships as well, because there may be that fear that something's gone out around about them and they don't know what's being said or being put out about them. So generally, I think any kind of major change in behavior, the happy outgoing child, happy to go up to rugby or whatever it was, not wanting to meet friends or go to school.
They're kind of isolating themselves or
Isolating,
self-shame.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Aoife, that's fantastic. Another one there. Should I let my child play a game that is age rated for older than them? They say that all the friends are already playing it. This is a common one. I think we all probably get asked.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's up to what a parent, I suppose, believes themselves and their own core values is a big part of it. But I think as well to do due diligence. And my go-to here is always to check, okay, well, are the friends all playing this game? So like, do you have a friend parent, that you can ask with similar age and kind of going, I've heard for Fortnite, for example, they're all playing Fortnite apparently. Like, is that true? And asking a couple of parents, I think, to find out, well, is it happening there? And I think to do your own research on it as well. So look up, well, what is the age rating? What are, the experts saying? Generally you'll find that maybe like on our hub or on Webwise, there'll be general advice on certain games. So really good to do your research and maybe as well, sit down with your young person, look at the game and look at what it entails. Is it a very violent game? Is it very aggressive? Like how are women treated? I think that's the, on it, and what's the purpose of the game, what's the language used. So to do your homework, I think, like anything, like to do your research and to check what other parents are doing. And I would have found this, and mentioned Pester Power earlier, when my oldest wanted a phone and he was saying everybody in the class has a phone. And I was like, but I'm going to find out if everybody in the class has a phone, and kind of talking to the other parents and to check where everyone else was at. And generally you find that maybe one or two do, but not everybody does. So if you're not happy to go that game or go down that road, that's your fallback some of the time. But to do your own bit of research on it, I think. And look, like as I said, everyone's values are going to be a bit different. Some people will let their 12-year-old watch a 15s movie. That's okay in their house. They're sitting down to watch it together, so I think you have to look at what you're comfortable with as well.
Yeah, I think that's key as a parent, isn't it? About trusting your own gut and what you feel your child is able for and ready for.
Yeah.
There's another question. My daughter recently downloaded Instagram and today received a notification to do a video selfie to ensure that she isn't a bot. I don't allow her to post videos and photos online, so I'm a bit unsure about this. How do I know what they will do with this afterwards? The app won't function until she does this.
That sounds unusual to me. I haven't heard Instagram requiring that. Like the closest I can think is, I know with Revolut you have to do facial recognition, but I hadn't heard of that in relation to Instagram. So I definitely would be checking that out. And like, I absolutely agree with this person. What are they doing with the information after? And I think that's something we kind of maybe skirted over tonight, was privacy and the implications for young people's privacy into the future, and GDPR and all of those kind of issues. So I think this mom is really, our dad is really right to question this. So maybe some further investigation.
Yeah.
Definitely
Okay.
warranted, yeah.
There's another one here. What's the recommended age for kids to be allowed to use TikTok or Snapchat, especially given peer pressure and other kids being honest when they are not? So it kind of relates a little bit to what you've already spoken to, but if you want to maybe give us a little bit more insight into that one.
Yeah, this is a really hard one, because I know from my own kids that there are kids in third and fourth class who have access to Snapchat, maybe on a device or a tablet, and TikTok as well. And parents will have certain rules around TikTok. You can have TikTok, but you're not allowed to post videos on it, or you can have it with like 3 or 4 friends. So I know parents, in my, say, friendship group, who'd have certain rules around that. Privacy is a big one for me. So even though they mightn't be allowed, or sorry, even the content they're watching, going back to the kind of neuromarketing pieces, well, what are they watching? It's not just about sharing stuff online, it's also about what they're watching and exposed to. And we'd have covered Snapchat before in terms of things like cyberbullying and all of those kind of issues. So yeah, like they have ages on them for a reason. But it is a difficult one, and I suppose it goes back to what are you comfortable with and what's okay in your house. And again, talking to other parents, look, as I said, I see kids in my child's class on Snapchat and TikTok. It's not for me. He won't be going on it for at least another year or two, and I'm trying my best to hold out. But to be really mindful of the safeguards and privacy, and that the kind of behavior online as much as anything. But it's really difficult, and I don't really have a kind of a direct answer.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, really. Like you said, the age rating is there for a reason, and you really again have to trust your gut on this one, to see if your child's ready for any social media, and the amount of social media, because like you said earlier, we can just get into a habit of scrolling, can't we, through all the different accounts while it's there. So
yeah, I suppose it's multifaceted, the reasons why, you're kind of trying to push it out as far as you can and keep it on the long finger, and it's for all those reasons you mentioned. And the age, the verification piece, and it can be a great get out of jail card as well, and kind of go, well, you're not allowed, that's, you're not allowed to go on that till you're 16, and that's the rules. So, but it's very hard, extremely hard, when everyone else around them is on those sites and on those platforms, and they're not, and potentially getting left out of stuff. But yeah, it's I empathize, I really do.
Yeah, it's a tough one. There's another one similar again, Aoife. My daughter came home from school very upset, as they had been asked during a lesson who had Snapchat, and she was the only one who hadn't. We had held out as long as possible, but we gave in after that. Any advice for rules to put in place?
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of rules, I think it's a really lovely exercise to be able to sit down with your child and kind of develop the rules, and what are the non-negotiables for you. So like time limits. I've mentioned the Family Link app, and I'm sure there are other apps. It's just the one that I do particularly use, and I'm not endorsing any one or the other, but you can put screen time limits on that. You get a half an hour Snapchat. If you're staying with that, you can get a half an hour, and you get an hour generally, or whatever it is. And we're agreeing to that, and you can have that on these days, or and a little bit more time at weekends. So I think coming up with the rules together means you're more likely to have everybody stick to the rules, and what are the consequences as well. And I know we talked about, restrictive mediation, rather than taking the device when something goes wrong. Are there other consequences, or maybe taking the device is what you agree upon? And maybe there's a reward, like, for good behavior online, just as much as for anything else. But if they stick to the rules, maybe over time you can increase it, but coming up with them yourself together is a nice way of, I suppose, broaching it from the start. But also having, like, these are the non-negotiables in my house, as the parent, putting in pretty strict boundaries and what you're comfortable with.
Thanks, Aoife. We do actually have a previous webinar we did called Don't Fear the Online World. Don't teach your child to fear the online world, teach them to navigate it. And that can be found on our ISPCC YouTube channel. So if parents want to link into that webinar and have a look, it does actually cover a lot of that topic as well. So there's another post after coming in. I have a tracker on my child's phone. How do I limit screen time? Etc. Is that an app? And thanking you very much, Aoife. It was brilliant. So how do you limit your screen time? It's available. You can use it.
You can use it, but I will put a disclaimer on it, because kids do have ways around it. So I try and be as vigilant as possible with it, because I know that they're far cleverer than me on technology and can get around it, I'm convinced. Or else it's just the app isn't playing ball for me. But so I try and kind of check it pretty regularly to make sure. And I look on an occasion or two when there was challenges, shall we say, at home, I've turned off the Wi-Fi. I will admit it, just to kind of go, right, well, look, this is where we're at now, and this is what we're doing, because the behavior isn't what we agreed. But I would try and be as vigilant as possible, as I said, regularly checking whatever app it is that you're using, or whatever screen limitations. And if behavior has gone well and they've done something and are helped in another situation, I might give them a little bit of extra time. So it really depends. And I think it is a little bit about that give and take, and saying I trust you, and it goes back to establishing trust, because as they grow, you're trying to kind of they're trying to move the boundaries, but also you have to, like, give them a little bit more leeway as they get older, certainly into the mid and late teens. This is their world. And I suppose it's to move with them too. So it's not like it's an outright ban or whatever until they're whatever age, that maybe you can move with them. And as the a previous colleague of mine used to say, trust until you can't, and it's when you can't then that you have to maybe put certain things in place. But you're moving always towards a position of trust, and keeping the communication open, because if you are too restrictive and you are shutting everything down, they may not want to come to you when something does go wrong, and you always want to be there when something does go wrong, and to be that person for them.
Absolutely. I think sometimes it's about us being consistent as well as parents.
Yes.
Say what you mean and mean what you say as well.
100%.
Yeah,
and that's
really
hard, but yeah, I think
really
you're
hard.
right, Jenny. Yeah.
I skipped a question there. Sorry, I missed over it. Why is it so important for the kids to have Instagram or Snapchat in their lives so young? Why does somebody not put a stop to that? It's the next generation, and they only burn their brain cells, I think.
Yeah, it's the world we live in, isn't it? And I think even when Facebook came out, and Facebook now, I suppose, would be quite maybe seen as benign compared to some of the social media platforms now. You just want what everybody else wants. I think that's a natural feeling. And look, I suppose, as part of the work that we do in terms of advocacy and policy in ISPCC, we try and work really closely with government and agencies to put really strict regulations and controls in place, because I think that is really important, and to work with organizations like Comisiún na Man, that's there now to protect people in the digital space that we find ourselves now, and to advocate for stronger education, increased safeguards. Holding the platforms to account is a huge part of that. also running these type of webinars and, you know, meeting with people and discussing the issues that come up. It's kind of a multi-layered, I suppose, approach that we would be trying to take in ISPCC to try and make the online world as safe as possible for young people. But it is also where they're at and what is a huge part of their lives. So teaching them responsibility as well in relation to that. Sorry, that's a very long-winded answer, but I think it's multi-layered, I suppose, and complex at times. But I suppose we're always striving to make it as safe as possible and to make everybody, you know, who's got a role in it, to hold them to account really, and ensure that they're doing as much as possible to ensure that it is safe as possible for young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not just leaving it up to the young people to police themselves or to
Exactly,
police Aoife, thanks so much for that. I think that's the end of the questions there for the moment. So I just like to finish up there this evening and say thank you very much to everybody who's been watching at home this evening. If you've any questions or you just want to chat to any of us, you can reach out to the community engagement team. So Siobhan's email address is there and my own email address is there as well. We can pass on any messages to Aoife as well if you want to get in touch as well. So I'd like to wish you all a very lovely evening and we hope to see you again. Take care.